Elden Ring is an open-world action RPG from Software, and the moment you step into Limgrave, it does something most games won't. It says nothing. No quest markers, no map full of icons, no hand-holding. Just a massive, dangerous world and you standing in the middle of it. At first, it's a lot. There's real threat in every direction, and the game doesn't prep you. But that's exactly the point. Once you start reading the world instead of a checklist, something shifts. That open field isn't just scenery, it's a puzzle you solve on your own terms. The scale here is unlike anything From Software has made before. You're on horseback now, crossing wide open landscapes, stumbling into hidden caves, getting lost in ruins you never planned to visit. You might ride toward a castle and end up underground an hour later. The world just keeps going. Story isn't handed to you either. It lives in item descriptions, scraps of dialogue, details you have to notice yourself. That makes it genuinely curious. And the bosses? Massive, bizarre, almost theatrical, the kind that make you stop and say, what is this thing? Elden Ring earns that 10 out of 10 because it trusts you completely. It doesn't lead you, it opens the door and steps back. You explore, you fail, you figure it out. And that slow process of mastery is something that sticks. God of War 2018 finds Kratos in a Norse world, older now, quieter. He's not chasing revenge anymore. He's raising his son, Atreus. And for a man who spent years tearing gods apart with his bare hands, figuring out how to be a father is a whole different kind of war. The combat carries that weight. It's slower than the old games, more deliberate, more grounded. The Leviathan axe is one of the best feeling weapons in any action game. Every throw, every recall, every hit lands with real impact. And Atreus isn't just there to watch. He fights alongside you, grows as the story goes on, and becomes a natural part of how you play. But what makes this one actually stick is the relationship. The dynamic between Kratos and Atreus shifts as you go. They argue, they misunderstand each other, they push through it, and all of it plays out in a single, unbroken camera shot. No cuts, no fades, one continuous journey, whether you're in the middle of a fight or drifting quietly across a lake while Atreus talks. God of War 2018 gets a 10 out of 10 because it doesn't just do everything well, it does it all at once. Combat, story, world, all pulling in the same direction, nothing wasted. Most games spend their whole runtime figuring out just one of those things. This one didn't have to choose.
Now we're going somewhere else entirely, darker, stranger. Bloodborne drops you into Yharnam, a city rotting from the inside. Disease, madness, creatures that used to be people. And from the very first minute, it makes one thing clear. You are not safe here. There are no shields. You don't wait. You dodge, you press in, you take hits and immediately fight back to claw your health back. Every encounter is aggressive by design, and the game punishes hesitation hard. It's intense, and it's meant to be. You come in looking for a cure. That goal disappears fast. What takes over is the mystery. The streets, the shortcuts, the enemy designs. Every detail is pulling you deeper, making you want to understand what this place actually is, what happened here, what you're really part of. Your weapons transform mid-fight, shifting how you move and attack. The level design loops back on itself in ways that feel almost architectural. Areas connect where you'd never expect, and nothing is ever explained outright. You piece it together from item descriptions, scraps of lore, fragments of dialogue. The deeper you go, the more unsettling it gets. And once it finally clicks, once you're in the rhythm, it's hard to stop. That's the 10 out of 10. Every piece of Bloodborne, combat, world, atmosphere, mystery, fits together like it was built as one thing. It just locks on and doesn't let go.
This one didn't just raise the bar for RPG storytelling, it changed what the bar even looks like.
The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt puts you in the boots of Geralt of Rivia, a monster hunter navigating a world at war, looking for people he cares about while everything around him burns. And from the very first decision, it makes something clear. Nothing here is clean. No obvious right answers, no tidy moral victories, just messy situations with real consequences. What makes the choices land is the delay. You'll make a call early on, move forward, get deep into something else entirely, and then, hours later, it comes back. Different than you expected, heavier than you expected, because the world actually remembers. And that world is enormous in all the right ways. Skellige feels brutal. Open water, gray skies, storms that look like they've been there forever. Novigrad feels crowded and corrupt. Even random villages have a history. It doesn't feel like a map. It feels like somewhere that's been going on for centuries and just happened to let you in. The writing carries the whole thing. Side quests hit as hard as the main story. Characters feel lived in. Then there are the expansions, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine, which aren't extras, they're full stories, the kind that would be selling points on their own. The Witcher 3 doesn't flinch. It hands you a broken world, complicated people, and impossible choices, and trusts you to figure it out. You don't play through a story here, you build one. That's why it's a 10 out of 10. Most games ask you to care about the mission. This one makes you care about the people. Mass Effect 2 puts you in command of a crew on a mission that has bad odds written all over it. The setup is almost simple. Recruit a team, prepare for a suicide run. But the way the game builds toward that final stretch is unlike almost anything else in the genre. You spend most of your time getting to know your squad, and not in a shallow way. Every member has their own backstory, their own wounds, their own loyalty mission that gets personal fast. Is one of the best sequences in gaming. Everything the game set up comes together and it hits. Mass Effect 2 gets a 10 out of 10 because it cracks something most games never figure out. It makes the gameplay and the story feel like the same thing. Every fight matters because the people in it matter. Most games spend years chasing that. This one got there. Hollow Knight is a hand-drawn Metroidvania set in Hollownest, a ruined underground kingdom long past its peak. It doesn't come at you loud, no big cinematic opener, no tutorial spelling everything out. It just starts quiet, and that quiet never fully goes away. At first, the world feels empty, but emptiness is doing a lot of work here. The further you go, the more you realize things are hidden everywhere. Paths tucked behind walls, strange characters with stranger histories, secrets that reward the players who stop and look. The art is sparse but precise. The music sits low in the mix, heavy like a place that's already grieving. The movement is exactly right, tight, responsive, never fighting you. The combat demands focus. Bosses don't forgive mistakes, but when you die, you know why. It feels earned in both directions. What Hollow Knight really gets right is restraint. It tells you almost nothing. No waypoints, no exposition drops. You figure it out, and figuring it out feels like yours. Every new room, every hidden boss, every piece of lore you piece together, it hits differently because you worked for it. And just when it feels like it's wrapping up, it opens further, more of everything. Lore, paths, fights you never saw coming. Scale isn't the point. 3 people made a world that feels infinite, and it rewards your curiosity every single time you follow it somewhere. That's the 10 out of 10. One of the roughest launches in gaming history still made the list. Let's talk about that.
Cyberpunk 2077 is an open-world RPG set in Night City, a place that never sleeps, never quiets down, and never stops wanting something from you. You play as V, a merc trying to claw your way up. Early on, things go sideways in a very specific way. Johnny Silverhand ends up hardwired into your head, and Johnny talks constantly. But he's not just noise. He pushes back, questions your calls, and sometimes says the thing everyone else is too polished to say. The tension between V and Johnny isn't a subplot, it's the spine of the whole game. Identity, control, what's left of you when piece by piece gets chipped away. Night City earns its own entry. Corporate towers stacked above back alleys choked with neon. People everywhere with their own business, their own problems. The density isn't decorative. The city feels like it runs without you. And the way you move through it is completely your call. Go in loud and blow the whole thing up. Ghost through on stealth and hacks. Talk your way out if the option's there. The flexibility is real and it follows you into the story. Some choices sit fine after you make them, some don't, and that discomfort is the point. Cyberpunk 2077 earns a 10 out of 10 not despite its history, but because of what it became. A game with sharp writing, flexible systems, and a city that never stops pressing in on you from the first minute to the last. This is the one that doesn't negotiate. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is pure precision. No builds to lean on, no grinding your way to better stats, no safety net of any kind. It's a sword combat game where every fight is a conversation. You read the enemy, find the rhythm, and stay in it. Back off too long and you lose control. Stay too aggressive and you get punished. The space in between is where the game actually lives. You play as Wolf, a one-armed shinobi protecting a young lord through a version of feudal Japan that blends real history with something much stranger and more unsettling underneath. The goal isn't just to survive enemy attacks, it's to break them. You deflect, you pressure, you destroy their posture until they're open. It feels different from anything else From Software has made. The world holds its end too. Foggy mountain temples, burning castles, massive things waiting in places that feel too quiet. The atmosphere never lets the tension drop. And then there are the bosses. Some of them will stop you cold for hours. The game doesn't apologize for that. When you finally break through, when the pattern locks in and you execute it perfectly, it lands differently than a regular win. You didn't get stronger stats, you actually got better. That distinction is everything. It commits completely and asks you to do the same. No shortcuts, no compromises, just the moment when it finally clicks, and there's nothing like it. That's what makes it earn the score. After all that intensity, a game that just lets you be Batman, properly. Batman Arkham City takes everything Batman Arkham Asylum built and opens it up. Gotham now stretches out in every direction, rooftops, alleyways, towers, and everything below. And the thing is, it earns that size. Every corner is doing something. Side missions, hidden secrets, groups of thugs who genuinely don't know what's coming. The city doesn't feel padded, it feels full. Moving through it might be the best part. Gliding off a ledge, diving, pulling the cape open at the last second, then dropping straight into a fight, it never stops feeling exactly right. The traversal and the combat speak the same language, and together they do something most action games don't. They make you feel powerful and precise at the same time. The combat itself is still a masterclass. Smooth, fast, chain-driven. You're not button mashing, you're reading the room, tracking enemies, weaving in gadgets and counters and takedowns until it flows. Years later, other games are still borrowing from it. What keeps people talking, though, is the story. The writing is tight, the performances are committed. Every major character feels like they matter, and Joker, in particular, is handled with a weight that builds slowly and lands hard when it finally hits. That ending sticks. It doesn't ask you to choose between great gameplay and great story. It just gives you both, wrapped in a world that genuinely feels like Gotham and never once lets up. That's the 10 out of 10. This one starts with a parasite in your brain and only gets weirder from there. Baldur's Gate 3 is a massive RPG built entirely around one idea. Your choices actually matter. Not in the checkbox way most games pretend they do, in the real way, where things go sideways hours later because of something you barely remember doing. Fail a dice roll, trust the wrong person, say something you shouldn't, the world notices and it doesn't reset. The freedom here is remarkable. Every obstacle in this game has at least 3 solutions. Talk through it, sneak around it, or burn the whole thing down. And the game handles all of it without flinching. You can talk to animals. You can completely derail your own plan with one bad call. You can spend an hour doing something the developers clearly didn't plan for, and it still works. The reactive systems underneath are doing a huge amount of heavy lifting. The companions hold their end too. Shadowheart and Astarion aren't there to fill party slots. They have opinions, histories, and memories. How you treat them changes how they treat you. And these aren't dialogue trees that feel like menus. They feel like conversations. The voice acting sells every moment of it. It doesn't iron things out, it lets things get complicated, lets your choices lead somewhere unexpected, and trusts that the mess is what makes it feel real. There's nothing else quite like it, and that's why it's a 10 out of 10. NieR Automata looks like an action game. It's not really. The surface reads clean enough. Android fighters, sharp sword combat, a ruined sci-fi world overrun by machines. Platinum Games built the action, and it stays fast and responsive the whole way through. But the moment you think you've got a handle on what this game is, it shifts, and it keeps shifting. You follow 2B and 9S. The world they move through is quiet and empty in a way that feels intentional, like something enormous already ended here and you just showed up in the aftermath. The music doesn't let you forget it. It's the kind of score that sits with you after you put the controller down. Heavy, strange, occasionally beautiful. Here's the thing about the ending. There isn't one, not the first time. The game sends you back, and those extra playthroughs aren't padding. They change what you see, what you understand, and what everything you already experienced actually meant. By the end, you're not really thinking about the combat anymore, you're thinking about loss and purpose, and what it means to keep moving when nothing makes sense anymore. And then, somehow, after all of that weight, it still gives you something small to hold on to. NieR Automata earns a 10 out of 10 not because it plays well, though it does, because it stays. Days later, weeks later, it's still there in the back of your head. That's rare. That's the whole point. Most remakes preserve something. This one perfected it. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a full rebuild, not a polished job. Capcom went back to the original, kept what made it iconic, and reworked everything else from the ground up. New visuals, redesigned combat, expanded story. The result doesn't feel like a remake, it feels like what the original was always reaching for. The pacing is relentless in the best way. Every encounter, every area, every sightline feels placed with intention. You're never fully comfortable. Resources stay just tight enough that you're always making decisions. When to fight, when to run, when to spend the ammo. That pressure never drops. Leon still has the personality, but he carries it differently now. Quieter, more worn. Like someone who stopped being surprised by the impossible a long time ago. The atmosphere matches him. Tight, dim, strange. The village breathes around you. The lighting makes everything feel like something's about to happen, even when nothing is. And when things do happen, the combat lands with weight. Shots connect with real impact. Enemies take hits and react, push back, flank you, close in. It gets messy, beautifully, deliberately messy. It does the hardest thing a remake can do, surpass the original without losing why people loved it in the first place. No other game has pulled that off quite like this. That's the 10 out of 10.
Some games try to feel cinematic. This one just is. Ghost of Tsushima drops you into the Mongol invasion of Japan as Jin Sakai, a samurai raised on a very specific code, thrown into a war where that code keeps getting him killed. So he adapts. And that adaptation isn't just a story beat, it's the entire architecture of the game. The island moves, grass bends in the wind, leaves cut across the screen, light breaks through forests in ways that stop you mid-ride. But it's not beauty for its own sake. The world itself guides you. Wind pulls you toward objectives. Nature replaces the minimap. It sounds like a small thing. It changes everything about how the game feels to play. Combat is sharp and intentional. Every swing carries weight. You can meet enemies head-on, proper samurai, disciplined, structured. Or you can ghost them, move silent, strike fast, vanish. And crucially, that choice isn't just mechanical, it's personal. Every time you choose the ghost over the samurai, the game makes sure you feel it. The duels deserve their own mention. One-on-one, no noise, just timing and focus, and the weight of a single moment. They look and feel exactly like the old films they're pulling from. Ghost of Tsushima never splits apart. The combat, the world, the story, they all speak the same language. That kind of coherence is harder to achieve than it looks. That's what the score is for.
This one is about walking, and somehow that's exactly enough. Death Stranding puts you in a hollowed-out version of America with one job: deliver cargo across it. On paper, that sounds like the least compelling pitch in gaming, and then you play it. Every trip is a decision tree. How much weight can you carry? What's the terrain doing? Is the weather going to turn? Will the invisible threats be active today? You're not just moving from point A to B, you're solving it constantly, on foot. And somewhere in that repetition, something clicks. A long stretch of open land, the right song dropping in at exactly the right moment. And this quiet game about carrying boxes becomes something else entirely. What makes it genuinely special is the layer underneath, the social system. You never see other players, but you see their work. A ladder left at a cliff edge, a road someone built to cut the trip in half, small gestures from strangers that land with more weight than most games manage with cutscenes. You're alone out there, and somehow you're not. The story commits fully to its weirdness, BBs, timefall, things the game expects you to just accept, and it mostly works, grounded by performances that take it seriously even when the ideas get strange. It doesn't ask for your permission. It builds something completely its own and trusts you'll meet it halfway. And when you do, it's unlike anything else in this medium. That's why it's a 10 out of 10.
Hideo Kojima does not make normal games. This one might be his most unhinged and his most brilliant. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is an open-ended stealth sandbox set across Afghanistan and parts of Africa, and the first thing it does is hand you a situation and step back. Sniper from a ridge? Fine. Ghost the whole compound without being seen? Fine. Call in a helicopter with music blasting and go completely loud? Also fine. The game doesn't care which one you pick, it just wants to see how you play it. What makes it stick is how alive the systems feel together. Movement is tuned perfectly. Every tool, every enemy behavior, every environmental variable interacts in ways the game never fully telegraphs. You think you've seen everything, and then two systems collide in a way nobody planned for, and something ridiculous happens. Someone goes up on a balloon, a sandstorm covers a whole extraction, a dog with an eye patch helps you scout a base. The chaos is completely intentional. Underneath all of it sits a story that moves slowly and quietly. No grand speeches, no dramatic reveals handed to you. You piece it together through cassette tapes and small moments, and by the time the full picture lands, it's heavier than you expected. It's about identity, about what you become when you spend long enough doing what you've done. Yes, parts of it feel unfinished, that's real and it's fair, but the gameplay is so sharp and so deep that it holds. The freedom isn't a mode or a feature, it's the whole philosophy, and that philosophy, even unfinished, is something most games never get close to. That's what the score is for.
Most superhero games spend the whole time convincing you that you feel powerful. Marvel Spider-Man skips that part entirely. You step in as a Peter Parker who's already been doing this for 8 years. The suit fits, the jokes land on instinct. Moving through New York isn't something you learn, it's something you inhabit. Dive off a tower, catch the speed, zip into a swing, pull up at the last second and go again. The traversal doesn't just feel smooth, it feels like muscle memory that isn't yours. That's the trick. You arrive already believing it. Combat keeps pace with it. Fast, layered, constantly moving. You're reading the room, juggling enemies, sticking one to a wall, pulling a weapon out of someone's hands mid-air, dodging the hit you almost didn't see coming. There's a lot happening at once, and the game never lets it turn into noise. It stays readable, stays intentional, and as you unlock new abilities and suits, it keeps deepening without ever asking you to restart the learning curve. But here's the thing. Underneath all of that, Peter's life is quietly falling apart, and the game doesn't treat that as background. The smaller scenes carry as much weight as the set pieces. There are moments with Aunt May that land harder than any boss fight in the game, and the way it all closes, it earns it, every minute of it. It doesn't balance fun and story, it refuses to separate them, both running at full speed the entire time. That's the 10 out of 10.
You've heard of this one, you've probably already played it, and it probably still pulled you back in more than once. There's a reason for that. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is an open-world RPG that figured something out most games are still chasing. It doesn't make demands. You show up, the world opens, and it steps back. One quest becomes three becomes a faction. The faction leads you somewhere unexpected, and somewhere in there you forgot what you originally logged in to do. That's not a design flaw, that's the whole point. The world doesn't signal its best moments. You're moving through a snowfield and something catches your eye on a ridge. You follow it. An hour later, you're deep inside a ruin with its own story, its own atmosphere, its own weird piece of lore that connects to something else if you're paying attention. Nobody put an arrow on the map, you just found it, and finding it yourself changes how it feels entirely. You also decide who you are, a warrior who never speaks to anyone, a mage working through every guild questline, someone who completely ignores the main story and just picks herbs for 200 hours. Skyrim accommodates all of it without judgment. The game bends to fit you, not the other way around. Is it flawless? No, the bugs are real, the physics have always been strange. None of that matters once you're inside it. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim earns a 10 out of 10 not because it does everything perfectly, but because the world it builds stays with you long after you've put it down. That kind of staying power doesn't happen by accident.
If Elden Ring is what brought you to From Software, this is what was there the whole time. Dark Souls 3 is an action RPG built on a simple foundation: difficulty, patience, and the specific satisfaction of earning every step forward. It doesn't ease you in. It doesn't apologize for being hard. It hands you a world in slow collapse and expects you to figure out your place in it. The combat is the center of everything. Enemies hit with real weight, bosses hit harder, and a margin for error is tight enough that every mistake registers. But once you start reading it, really reading it, understanding the timing, recognizing the tells, something shifts. The difficulty stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like the game respecting you. You're not getting stronger stats, you're actually getting better. That distinction lands differently than most games let it. The world holds its atmosphere all the way through. Crumbling castles, empty corridors, areas that feel like they've already given up. It all carries this sense of something enormous winding down. Lothric Castle, the untended graves. These aren't just well-designed levels. They feel heavy, like history that already happened and left its marks everywhere. The story doesn't explain itself. Item descriptions, fragments of dialogue, things you have to want to piece together. Most players never get the full picture, and the game is completely at ease with that. You build your own understanding of what ended here and why. And when the music arrives at a boss, really arrives, it makes the whole thing feel like the stakes were real from the beginning. Dark Souls 3 knows exactly what it is. Most games try to be everything. This one doesn't. It commits to one thing completely, and that commitment is the whole reason it works. That's what the score is for. Nobody expected this one, and then it arrived and changed the conversation entirely.
Black Myth Wukong is an action RPG built from Chinese mythology, the legend of the Monkey King, gods, demons, and curses that never fully died. You play as the Destined One, stepping into a lineage you're still figuring out, moving through a world that feels like it was pulled directly from sacred illustrations and set into motion. That's not a metaphor. Every environment, every enemy, every boss looks like detailed ancient artwork running in real time. The visual presentation alone puts it in rare company. But the combat holds up its end. Your staff isn't a fixed weapon. It shifts, extends, slams, and changes shape depending on how you need to use it. You can transform mid-fight, fully, into creatures that carry their own movesets and completely reframe how you're approaching the moment. It stays fluid without losing weight. Hits land. Timing matters. Boss fights test your actual understanding of the game, not just your patience. What ties it together is how unified it all feels. The combat, the world, the sound design, every swing, every roar, every chant sits exactly where it should. Nothing feels disconnected from anything else. It didn't show up to compete with what already existed. It showed up to do something entirely its own and pulled it off completely. No argument needed. That's a 10 out of 10.
Most historical games use the past as a backdrop. This one makes you feel like you're actually inside it. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 continues Henry's story, a blacksmith's son caught inside a civil war he has no business being near in Bohemia, 1403. I put around 60 hours into this before it earned a spot on the list. The sequel goes bigger on every axis. The map expands, the cities fill out. Kutna Hora feels like a real functioning place, not a game set. Quiet villages in snow, crowded markets, political conversations that go somewhere. The world doesn't just look populated, it behaves like one. Rumors spread, people remember you, your reputation follows you into rooms before you open the door. The combat is tighter this time around. Sword fights have real weight behind them, the kind that makes every exchange feel like something is actually at stake. The side systems go deeper too. Blacksmithing, hunting, the way you carry yourself, these aren't window dressing. They feed back into who Henry is and how the world responds to him. And then the game turns unpredictable. You're working a forge, and then suddenly you're in the middle of a siege. You're tracking one problem, and a political thread pulls everything sideways. It keeps you genuinely uncertain about what's coming next, and that uncertainty is where it lives. Most RPGs gesture at a world that feels genuinely real. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 actually builds one, systems and story moving in the same direction rather than competing with each other. No other game in the genre commits to it like this. That's what the score is for.
It opens looking like something familiar. Within an hour, it's entirely its own. Lies of P takes the Pinocchio story, strips out everything warm and safe, and drops it into a city that has completely collapsed in on itself. Gothic architecture rusted over with cold machinery, halfway between a dream and something much worse. You play as P, a puppet who looks more human than the people left standing around him. That inversion sits at the center of everything the game does. The combat is where it earns its reputation. Tight, demanding, and precise. Blocking, parrying, reading enemy timing, managing your build across weapon components you can mix and match in ways the genre usually doesn't allow. It's not copying the Souls-like formula, it's sharpening it. Mistakes cost you, fights have weight, and the game never lets the difficulty feel arbitrary. It always feels like the challenge is pointing at something. Krat, the city, does the rest. The people you meet in it feel genuinely damaged, not just as set dressing, but as something the story keeps returning to. And then there's the lying itself. Not a gimmick, a mechanic woven into your choices that slowly shifts the world around you depending on what you decide and what you give away. It adds gravity to moments that would otherwise be throwaway. It arrived without a franchise behind it and stood next to the games that built this genre, not by imitating them, but by finding its own reason to exist. That's harder than it looks. That's what makes it earn the score. Dark Souls Remastered drops you into Lordran and steps back. The only real tutorial is the world itself, enemy placements that teach you to read threats, architecture that tells you where to go without marking it anywhere. It assumes you're going to die, and it makes that the point. What separates it from everything that followed isn't the difficulty, it's the world. Lordran isn't a collection of levels connected by loading screens. It folds back on itself. Shortcuts open up between areas you thought were completely separate. A door you couldn't unlock 3 hours ago was always connected to something you're standing in right now. The world is one continuous handcrafted structure, and realizing that for the first time is one of gaming's great moments. It makes the whole thing feel like somewhere that actually exists. The story is buried everywhere. Tombstones, item descriptions, scraps of overheard dialogue, architecture that implies things nobody ever says outright. You can finish the entire game and only understand a fragment of it, but the questions it leaves you with stay. They've fueled more theory and discussion than most games with 10 times the cutscenes. The remaster keeps it intact, sharper, smoother, more stable, but the design doesn't shift. The difficulty is what it always was. The world is what it always was. And what it always was is the game that rewrote everyone's definition of what hard games were actually for. It didn't just launch a genre, it changed how a generation of players thought about patience, attention, and what it means to actually earn something. No other game did that. That's the 10 out of 10.
Every game on this list owes something to this one. Demon's Souls is where the formula started. Before Lordran, before the Undead Curse, before any of the lore that followed, there was Boletaria, a kingdom that opened a door it couldn't close, and paid for it. You show up after, alone, in the aftermath, trying to survive what's left. Bluepoint rebuilt it from the ground up, and the result is one of the best-looking games ever made. Not just technically, the castles carry real weight. The fog rolls through archways the way it should. Distant fires in the Boletarian Palace actually feel like they've been burning since long before you arrived. The visual work doesn't distract from what the game is, it amplifies it. The world looks the way it always deserved to. What the remake keeps, crucially, is the tension. Demon's Souls is quieter than its successors. There's less music, more silence, more space. Every sound fills it. A step on stone, something moving just around a corner, the specific noise an enemy makes when it spots you. It makes the whole thing feel genuinely lonely and genuinely dangerous in a way that's hard to explain until you're inside it. The world tendency system, the way your choices across each archstone shift the game's balance and unlocks, still doesn't get explained to you. You learn it, or you don't. But every piece of it feeds into the same feeling that this world is responding to what you do in ways you don't fully understand yet. Bluepoint made sure it isn't just history. It's the origin, rebuilt to a standard worthy of what it started. The score follows from that.
Most games give you freedom and then quietly point you toward the intended solution. Dishonored hands you the tools and genuinely steps back. You're Corvo, royal bodyguard, framed for the murder of the empress he was supposed to protect, operating now in a plague-hollowed city with a set of supernatural abilities and a very clear list of people responsible. What you do from there is entirely up to you. The powers are built to combine. Blink, short-range teleportation, is the backbone, but stack it with time slow, possession, the wind blast, and something small shifts into something you designed yourself. You're not choosing from a menu of playstyles, you're constructing one, piece by piece, and the levels are wide enough and layered enough that almost every approach works. Ghost an entire mission without a trace, go loud and catastrophic, something in between. The game accommodates all of it. What makes Dishonored genuinely special is that it reacts. The chaos system tracks how many lives you've taken, and Dunwall shifts around it. More deaths mean more rats, more infected guards, a harder city. The ending changes, the tone changes. The world is paying attention to how you move through it, and that feedback loop makes every decision carry more weight than it would in a game that doesn't care.
Then there's Dunwall itself, whale oil powering everything, plague walls cutting through streets, guards speaking in half conversations about things you'll never fully know. It's a city with a texture and a history that sits behind every surface, and exploring it feels like uncovering something rather than moving through a set. The freedom isn't decoration, it's load-bearing. Take it away, and there's no game left. Build it the way Arcane did, and you get something that still hasn't been fully matched. That's the 10 out of 10.
A Plague Tale: Requiem follows Amicia and Hugo across southern France, a world being consumed by plague, politics, and something much older underneath both. You are always moving towards something that keeps slipping further away, a cure, safety, a version of Hugo that isn't getting harder to reach. The gap between where you are and where you need to be is where the whole game lives. Requiem is bigger than its predecessor in almost every way. Wider landscapes, more intense sequences, visuals that shouldn't be possible for a world this dark and this detailed. But bigger doesn't mean louder. The game knows exactly when to slow down. A quiet shoreline, a moment of relief, the music dropping into something almost gentle, and then it takes it back. That rhythm, hope, and loss cycling past each other is what the whole thing is built around, and it never loses the timing. The rats are more than a mechanic. They move in waves, in floods, in walls of sound. They're the world's cruelty made visible. Navigating them, finding light, using fire, choosing when to run and when to hide, keeps the tension wound tight even in the quietest spaces. It never fully lets you breathe. What stays with you isn't any single set piece, it's the relationship. Amicia carrying everything she can and watching it not be enough. Hugo existing at the center of something neither of them asked for. By the time it ends, the weight has been building long enough that the final moments land exactly as hard as they should. It commits to being exactly one thing, a story about two people and how far love can hold before it breaks, and follows that all the way through to the end. That's why it's a 10 out of 10. Horizon Forbidden West is a massive open-world action RPG, and yes, the visuals hit immediately. Storms rolling over machine graveyards, light cutting through ruins half swallowed by jungle. Underwater systems so detailed they could be their own game. You will stop moving to look at this world. That part is guaranteed. But the world earns more than stairs. The machines are built as problems to solve, not targets to drain. Everyone has weak points, elemental resistances, and parts you can strip mid-fight. A tremor tusk doesn't go down because you shot it enough. It goes down because you read it, picked your moment, isolated a component, and followed through while everything else was still trying to kill you. Taking one down doesn't feel like a mechanic completing. It feels like something you actually figured out. Aloy sits at the center of all of it, and she's one of the more grounded leads in recent memory. She questions what she finds. She pushes back. She carries the weight of what she knows without performing certainty she doesn't have. In a genre that tends toward chosen one posturing, that restraint makes her feel like a real person moving through an impossible situation. The story expands the world in every direction. New tribes, new machines, new layers of what came to fore. It's a lot. It holds. It never lets any one element coast on the others. The world, the combat, the character, all pulling it full strength. The result is something that doesn't run out of things to show you. That's what makes it earn the score. Most series finales get one of two things right, the action or the goodbye. This one gets both. Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, catches Nathan Drake on the other side. The adventures are done, more or less. He's married, settled, running a salvage business quieter than anything he used to do, and telling himself that's fine. Then his brother Sam walks back in, presumed dead for 15 years with a problem that needs solving and a story that doesn't quite add up, and Drake goes. Of course he does. That's the part that was always going to be true about him. What follows is Naughty Dog at the peak of what they do. Set pieces that move with the weight of a film, a jeep chase through Madagascar mud, a gunfight across collapsing scaffolding, a motorcycle run through a coastal town that feels like it was designed to be the last thing you remember.
The action lands, but the game earns its best moments in the quieter spaces. Early on, you're climbing through Nathan's attic, flipping through old journals, and the whole arc of what this story is actually about starts to arrange itself. The game doesn't rush that. It trusts you to sit with it. The characters carry the whole thing. Elena still feels like the most functional person in any room Nathan Drake has ever walked into. Sam is a complication wrapped in charisma. Sully shows up and every scene gets warmer. The conversations don't sound written, they sound like people who've known each other too long to pretend anymore. And Libertalia, the pirate colony the treasure hunt circles around, turns out to be more than a location. It's a mirror. What it says about ambition and what people destroy chasing it lands harder because of how much the game has made you care before it says it. The ending gives Nathan Drake a goodbye that fits. Not spectacular, not tragic, just honest. That's harder to write than it sounds, and they got it right. It always knew the stakes were never really about the treasure. They were about the people. It never forgets that, not once, right through to the last frame. That's why it's a 10 out of 10.
The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is built entirely around one idea, that curiosity, followed without interruption, is enough to carry an entire world. There are no quest markers demanding your attention, no invisible walls, no system quietly corralling you toward the intended path. You see something on the horizon, and you go. That's the agreement the game makes with you from the first minute, and it never breaks it. What it does instead is make sure the world holds up to the looking. Rain makes cliff faces slippery, mid-climb without warning. Wind carries fire through dry grass if you're not watching. Enemies think in groups, circle you, press the moment they sense an opening. The physics and the weather and the combat all sit inside the same system, and that system is always running. You don't push through a world of static scenery. You move through something that's alive and paying attention. The quieter end of it is where Breath of the Wild separates itself from everything around it, gliding the length of a valley at the end of a long climb, throwing random ingredients into a pot, a piano note landing softly as you crest a hill, and then silence again, because the music only appears when it earns it. These moments don't feel designed, they feel discovered, and that distinction is everything. It understood something most open-world games are still catching up to. The point was never the destination, it was always the decision to go. No other game figured that out the same way. That's the 10 out of 10. The Last of Us is a story about two people crossing a country that's been falling apart for 2 decades. Fungal infection, collapsed cities, other survivors who are often the real threat. The infected are dangerous, the humans are worse. Every encounter is tense in the specific way that comes from limited resources and no good options. Ammo is something you count. Fights are close and ugly and over fast. The game never lets violence feel clean, and that's intentional. The world is rough, and the combat reflects it. But the action isn't what the game is made of. It's the space between. Conversations during a long walk that go somewhere you didn't expect. A joke Ellie makes and the way Joel almost reacts. The accumulation of small moments, all of them real feeling in a way the performances absolutely sell, that slowly does something to the relationship you thought you understood at the start. It shifts quietly over 20 hours. And then the ending arrives. People still argue about that ending. Still, more than a decade later. That alone tells you everything about what the game managed to pull off. The gameplay and the story don't just coexist, they need each other. The tension of survival makes the quiet moments land harder. The quiet moments make the tension unbearable. Take either away and you lose the whole thing. That's what makes it earn the score. Red Dead Redemption 2 follows Arthur Morgan, an enforcer, a loyalist, a man built for a way of life that the world has already decided is finished. The Vanderlinde gang is running out of road, and most of them can feel it. Arthur can feel it. The question isn't whether it ends badly. The question is what he does with what's left. The world Rockstar built around that story is unlike anything in this medium. Animals move through their own routines. Strangers start conversations that go sideways in ways you don't predict. Weather rolls in and changes how everything feels. You ride into a town you visited 6 times, and something small is different. A new face, a fire someone left burning, a conversation drifting out of a saloon window. None of it is pointed at you. It's just happening. The world doesn't perform for the player. It exists alongside them. The pace is slow by design. Long rides across open country, evenings back at camp. Conversations that don't move any plot forward, but make Arthur feel like a person rather than an avatar. And then something breaks. A job goes wrong, someone makes a choice they can't take back, and the weight of everything that's been building makes the fall hit harder than it has any right to. By the end, you're not finishing a game. You're saying goodbye to someone you spent 60 hours understanding. The story earns that. Arthur earns that. And that final stretch, the way it resolves, the way it lets him be something other than what the gang needed him to be, is some of the best writing this medium has produced. The world is enormous, but it's Arthur Morgan, one man running out of time, trying to figure out who he is before it's gone, that makes it matter. RDR2 never confused scale with depth. That's why it's a 10 out of 10.
That's all 30 10 out of 10 games, and every single one has actually earned it. If you've already cleared the whole list, respect, genuinely. If your backlog just got 4 games longer, same. And if you think I missed something obvious, say it in the comments. If you want more lists like this, rankings, deep dives, or recommendations, hit subscribe. There's a lot more coming.